Hello foodies, welcome into another video. I'm Das Food, and today I'm going to do something you probably would not expect me to do. I'm going to defend the Skull Merchant. That's right, I know. I'm the guy who put out two different videos, one of them titled I'm Disappointed, where I just basically said I don't like this chapter, I'm not excited about it. And then another where I said, hey, remember, if you don't like a chapter, don't buy it so that behavior will get the message you don't like it. Right? So you would think I would be the last person to say anything nice about the Skull Merchant, and generally you would probably be right. But if you've followed me for really any amount of time, you probably are familiar with the term good faith. I use it a lot. I talk about good faith, I talk about bad faith. It's very important to me that people approach things in good faith, because if you don't, if you approach it with a disingenuous view, it's the same thing as like a journalist who's just looking to smear somebody, right? You are getting nothing out of that. You're not doing your job properly. So for me, I want to be fair, and I want to dispel something that I'm seeing a lot of out here. And I've seen how this goes before. Right now, it's just in the comments, right? Right now, or at least at first it was just in the comments and on Twitter and things like that, where people would say, oh, well, you know, the Skull Merchant was probably supposed to be Predator, right? There's a good chance that this was supposed to be Predator. And then people start making videos on it. And by the way, people that I respect, people that I really like as content creators, people like Mint Skull, people like Polyester. Again, I like these content creators and I have no issue that they were debating this topic. I think it's a good topic to debate. But the problem that I have is I've seen how these things go with the wider community. I've seen how it goes from, well, this is something that, you know, maybe it was going to happen. Maybe this is something that could have been in the works. And in time it becomes, well, basically everyone knows that this was supposed to be Predator. Or, well, you know, remember back in 2023 when they lost the rights to Predator and they had to just dump out this Skull Merchant chapter. But I don't think that's it. And I'm going to put it out here. I'm going to make a bold statement. I'm going to make a bold statement, but I'm going to do it with a caveat. That caveat being, I have no sources, right? There is nobody inside of behavior who is feeding me information. But all the same, I will make my statement. Skull Merchant was never supposed to be the Predator. Give you a second to recoil in shock that I would come out here and state something so bold and yet so decidedly true. So what I did was I tried to take, I mentioned journalist earlier, right? I tried to take that journalistic approach of being unbiased. Well, the alleged journalistic approach of being unbiased, because all humans are biased, right? And I tried to look at the evidence. I tried to say, okay, why do people think this was supposed to be Predator? What would need to happen for me to be sure of it being Predator? Because at first, when people were talking about it, I was like, maybe. But let's look at it. Let's see what it is. So what I did was I basically broke down what a Predator chapter would have looked like. And then I said, okay, what do we have from this hypothetical chapter in the chapter that we're actually getting? The first thing that I did was I said, okay, what would we do with a Predator chapter? And I came up with 3 different versions of a Predator chapter that I think absolutely would have worked. Absolutely could have worked, would have been smash hits. I think the first and most obvious one, because look, again, 3 options. 3 options here for what could have been a good Predator chapter. The first option, just do OG Preddy. Just give us Dutch Schaefer, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and set it in Valverde, which is a fictional republic in South America, right? That's the obvious one. Just give us the classics. This cannot be smash of horror without Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Between Terminator and Predator, he's just done too much in the genre, or at least adjacent to the genre, that sci-fi horror realm, to not be in the game, right? I think that one's a pretty good case. But let's say, I don't know, the older these films seem to get, the more complex the licensing seems to be. So let's say they can't do that. Okay, what about option 2? A Predators 2010 themed chapter with the game reserve map and probably 2 survivors, those being Royce and Isabel. Because frankly, Royce was the main character, but Isabel was more interesting. Yeah, that one I think makes a lot of sense. You already come equipped with 3 different Predator variations, if not 4, because you would probably just include the base Predator from the OG film as the actual killer, and then you could have the Falconer and the Tracker and the Berserker, I think was the one with the jaw. So yeah, Those are two options that could have worked. And then the third one, let's say it's just an entirely new Yautja, which is the species of the predator, an entirely new Yautja facing off against an original survivor or two, likely in a heavily forested map, because that tends to be where we get Predator films. Whether it's Prey, the most recent one, Predator, the OG one, Predators, probably the only good one between them. That tends to be where we get it. Because yeah, sure, we got a Predator set in a city for Predator 2, but that was the whole point, was, whoa, this isn't where this is supposed to happen. And by the way, it was actually it was kind of a decent movie. People really give a hard time to Predator 2. I didn't hate it. It was a fun, stupid movie, but that's neither here nor there. So when we observe these chapters, I think we can pretty safely say it's not option 1. This was never meant to be the OG Predator against Arnold Schwarzenegger's Dutch Schaefer. That's just not what it is, right? None of that adds up. Not the map. I mean, obviously, what we got for a map, the rework of Valverde, that's not it. No, that's not what we're dealing with. The Brazilian twins that we're getting, I don't think they just tore Arnold in two, and instead of having him be Austrian, they made him Brazilian. I don't think that's what we did. And then as far as the similarities between Skull Merchant and the Predator, we're going to get to those in a second. Okay, so what about one themed around predators, right? Game reserve map. See, no, that's my other issue. The whole map thing really starts to fall apart. The map doesn't seem to hold up very well. So let's say hypothetically, it was option 2 or 3, and it was going to be Predators themed, the film 2010 Predators, or an entirely new Yautja facing off against original survivors, right? Let's talk about what's missing and what's there for that to have possibly been it. So there are similarities. That's why this came up, is because there are similarities between the Skull Merchant and the Predator. So let's go with the big one. Let's get the elephant out of the room. The wrist gauntlet. Yeah, no denying. That looks like the Predator's wrist gauntlet. Now, I will say it doesn't look like something you could just slap on the Predator and say, this is the wrist gauntlet, because it does look different to an extent, right? It's the same kind of weapon. It's the same general model of weapon, but it doesn't look quite like the Predator's wrist gauntlet. So I'll give you this one. And I know why everybody says, oh, well, that's got to be just like the Predator, because even when I was playing the PTB for the, hour that I played it before deciding it wasn't really for me, I was like, yeah, this does kind of look like the Predator's weapon. What's another thing? Okay, people have used the 3 dots that show up around the survivors when you're tracking them. And you know what? Another fair-ish point, I guess. Yeah, I would say the 3 dots are kind of famous with the Predator, but I'm going to get to why I don't think that really... I don't think it really lines up in just a second. So for the time being, I'll cede it to you, but then I'm going to take it back later. I'm just warning you now. Next up, drones and tracking. And this one to me is you talk about grasping at straws. This is the biggest grasp. Drones have never been an iconic part of the Predator. I keep hearing people say, but technically, right? Technically they show up. And yeah, they do in 2010's Predators. Yes, it would seem that the Falconer Predator sends its drones out when I almost called them the survivors. When the main characters, the humans, fall off of the waterfall and they're hiding underneath it. Yes, a drone does go out. Does that make this an iconic part of the Predator in the same way that some other things are? I don't think so. I would thoroughly disagree with that being an iconic part. Now, could they use it in a Predator chapter? Absolutely. Of course. They can use whatever they want. But do I think that this is some damning indictment that, oh yeah, look at this, smoking gun, we got him? No, not at all. So we've made a few connections between things that are vaguely Predator and appear in the Skull Merchants chapter, but let's talk about things that are Predator inspired, I would say iconic to the Predator to varying degrees, that don't show up in this chapter. Number 1 being heat vision. Heat vision is debatably the most famous thing about the Predator, and it's nowhere to be seen. Those who would argue with me on this would say, but there is tracking. Yes, but you can't just say there's tracking, right? That's not, it's almost like if we got a killer who in some way, maybe they bit people and you say, this was supposed to be a Jaws chapter because it bites. Like tracking and using heat vision they're related, but they're not the same thing. So no, there's no heat vision. What about the plasma launcher, right? That's where the three dots come from, is the plasma launcher. That is a pretty iconic part of the Predator, but ask yourself, okay, so there's this status effect where the three dots are around a survivor. How would that tie into a plasma launcher? What, is it just to let you know in the few seconds you would have before you get blasted? I don't think so. I don't think the plasma launcher would be used in the game, except ideally to break pallets and breakable walls, which would be a really cool animation, right? Maybe break gens. But no, I don't think that the plasma launcher is accounted for just because three dots are around a tracked survivor. I think that's ridiculous. I don't think that holds up at all. What about the skull ripping, the spinal cord ripping? Well, it's the skull merchant, so we've got you there, except no, there's... First off, let's call it like it is. There is no way that in the modern climate, the modern YouTube climate, the modern Twitch climate, all that, there is no way Dead by Daylight lets you rip out somebody's skull and spinal cord. There's just no way that happens. So, yeah, are there skulls that are on the drones? Of course. Does that account for the skull and spinal cord ripping? No, those would be wildly different assets. One of them involving mocap, right? This is not accounted for. It's not there. What about the guttural scream of the Predator? You know it. They have to do it in every film now. No, it's not there. It's not there, and nothing like it is in the game. What about the ability to mimic the voices of those you're hunting? That's pretty iconic. That's been in, I think, every Predator film except for maybe the AVP films. And Prey. I don't think it was in Prey either. But no, there's nothing like that with the Skull Merchant. She can't mimic them in any way. So, again, that's another thing that's just not there. What about the green blood? The green blood is iconic. We all love the green blood. It's, again, it's so notable. Everybody knows about it. But it's not there. And you could say, oh, but that's easy. They could just change the texture. And that's true. They could. I'm not going to fight too hard on that one. But it is worth noting that it's a highly iconic part. And it's missing. What about the aesthetic features? Okay, so people have talked about how on, I believe it's the left hand, the non-weapon hand, it's almost clawed in the same way that the Predator is. Yeah, okay, that's true. What about the tendrils? What about the dreadlocks? What about the tremendous size? What about the fishnet aesthetic? None of that's there. So you can point to one thing and say, that's kind of Predator-like. But does the Predator sway its hips seductively as it walks around? Does it wear a crappy $2 looking mask? No. Look, just because this one killer happens to have fingernails and the Predator happens to have fingernails, that's a pretty big reach. Okay, here's another one. Invisibility. Now I know some people at least might think they have me on this one. They might say, look at that, Food. You walk in the drones and you lose detection. You lose your terror radius. Okay. But do you turn invisible? No, you don't. You don't start to look like the Wraith. No. You're still visible. You're just hidden, right? And you might say, but what is the point of invisibility if not to hide? Look, this is another one of those things where, yeah, there are similarities, but it's not enough that I think they, at the last moment, were able to rush. I believe, with all that we just went over, I believe that the case that this is the Predator, or that it was the Predator, and last second they changed to something else, it's tenuous at best. Now, let me give some credit, let me give some credence to two things, right? The survivors, and the fact that they're Brazilian, which you might actually call that one thing. I don't know, but yeah, okay. Two original survivors set in a pretty heavily forested country in Latin America. Yeah, okay. If I was doing an original Predator chapter and I wanted to keep with the spirit of the license, I could see that. I really could. I could definitely see that working. So that is one thing I will acknowledge. I can't really explain it away outside of saying that Brazil is a huge market with tons of people, probably a pretty good player base. We know that Dead by Daylight, what was it, a few months ago, that they set up DBD Brazil, the Twitter account. So clearly they've got their eyes on Brazil. Yeah, I think it's just that they're wanting to hit a new market because that's kind of what they do, right? And by the way, no criticism. I'm not saying that's what they do in a bad way. No, that's their business. They look for markets. They identify markets. And this is going to bring in a lot of Brazilian players. But could you make the case that if you were going to do an original Predator chapter, you might set it in Brazil? Yeah, you could make that case. I'm not going to fight back on that one. But if that's all we have going for us, if all we have going is that this is a killer who fights South American survivors and has a wrist gauntlet, I mean, okay. Okay. Here's a question. Why is it that the drones are some kind of smoking gun? The drones, which were used in, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, one film, 2010's Predators. Maybe 2018's Predator, The Predator, sorry, these titles are ridiculous. Maybe 2018's The Predator had the drones and I just don't remember them. Why is it a smoking gun that the drones are here, but not that the Pred dogs, the Predator dogs, right? That were also in 2010's Predators and in 2018's The Predator. They're not there. Mimicry is not there. Invisibility is not there. The aesthetic features, the spinal cord ripping, the plasma launcher, the heat vision, none of that's there. But we're supposed to take the drones and the wrist gauntlet as some kind of proof. All I'm trying to do with this, right? All I'm trying to do, and I'm gonna be done here because I don't want to rant. This has been a rant. I want to advise you, when you criticize something, criticize it for what it is, not what you think it should have been or what it could have been. Don't go down that route because that's a losing way of criticizing something, right? I wish this had been Predator. Predator is great. We would have all been extremely hyped for Predator. But there's just no evidence. There is nothing. All is quiet on the Western Front with this one. What a cheery note to bring into this. No, I don't think this was ever Predator, but let me know down below. Do you think I am just a raving lunatic? Am I missing all of the signs? Is my tinfoil hat just not on tight enough? Because yeah, I love a good tinfoil hat. So I'd be open to hearing. But anyway, that's going to do it for me. Please do let me know. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Would you want the Predator? Is that something you would be hyped to see? Because for me, yes, that's like a top 5 license that I still think the game needs. But that's going to do it. Take care. See you in the next video. Bye, friends.
I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it. A life worth living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops beating. I'm feeding this demon. Got a taste, can't erase bitterness in my